Hello everybody and welcome to another off-the-shelf board game review. This week we're going to be looking at Nanobot Battle Arena by Derpy Games. It's a 2 to 8 player game that says ages 14 up, but the game can be played by much younger players. Average play times can be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes per player, looking at tops of about 45 minutes with an 8-player game, but you can probably get most of your games done in 30 minutes or less. In Nanobot Battle Arena, each player controls one single strain of nanobots, and the objective is to place your nanobots on the table and have the longest chain of nanobots at the end of the game. Of course, the game would be a little bit overly simple and a little bit too quick if the only objective was to play tiles on the board and add to the spice and the variety of the game. Each player is going to get a hand of cards, which is given the ability to do things such as pivot your opponent's nanobots so they don't form a chain anymore, meaning they get less points towards the end of the game. Play cards which are going to allow you to infect your opponent's nanobots, which means they're going to turn to the exact same kind of nanobot you happen to be, increasing the size of your chains, or you can just be perfectly devious and just burn your opponent's nanobots off the board, removing them from the game. Each one of these nanobots has their own special powers that they're a little bit better at than any other of the nanobots. For example, the ghost is able to move around the board once it's been played. The echidna can multiply in vast numbers, quickly overtaking the board if they're not kept in check by the other players. And the relic, once they enter the board, they can play cards that are going to make them immune to the other players' card play. Can you, through clever card play and clever placement of your nanobots, build the longest chain, keep your opponents from doing the same by playing cards to stop them, and end up winning the game? That is Nanobot Battle Arena. Before you learn how to play Nanobot Battle Arena, there's a couple really quick concepts you need to understand about this game. The first thing to understand is that every single nanobot has a facing. The front facing, or as the game refers to it as the base edge, is basically the front of every one of your nanobots, and all the other three sides are called standard edges. Your objective in Nanobot Battle Arena is you're trying to form the longest chain of nanobots in your strain only. And each player is going to start with one strain of nanobots. You're not going to use another strain at all. So, for example, this player would be using the echidna strain. This player would be using the inferno strain of nanobots. So to build your chain of nanobots, what you need to do is you need to attach their base edge or their facing to a non-base edge on another one of your own nanobots. So this would be a chain of 2 nanobots put together because we have a base edge touching a non-base edge. This would be a chain of 3 nanobots in our strain. This would be a chain of 4 nanobots in our chain, and so on. That would be a total of 5 nanobots in our strain forming a chain. Now, the important thing to understand is not your kind of nanobot standing next to other nanobots of your kind. They have to actually be properly faced to form a chain. So we have 2 base edges touching each other. They're actually not going to be a chain. We're going to have a chain of 5 up against a chain of 1. Or if we happen to have 2 non-base edges, 2 standard edges touching together, it's not going to form a total chain of 6. It's going to be a chain of 5, a chain of 1, and another chain of 1. So we have to make sure we're building our nanobots and laying them on the table in a good format so we're at least forming chains. So we'd have a chain of 3 here, 1, 2, 3, versus a chain of 5 nanobots, all in echidna's strain. The other very important thing to understand is that only you can ever put another nanobot in front of one of your own nanobots. And now, I want to make sure you understand, it's very important. You can move any other nanobot of any other strain in front of your nanobot. You can move them, but no other player can ever place a nanobot in front of one of your strains in front of their base edge. It's not allowed. So while in this example it would be 100% illegal for Inferno to place their nanobot in front of Echidna right here because they're blocking off the base edge of Echidna, it would be perfectly legal for the Echidna player to play a blink card and move a nanobot that is placed by another player and move it in front of one of their own base edges, because again, only you can ever move a nanobot in front of one of your nanobots of your own strain. Now, the reason why it's very important to make that distinction is because some cards you play can only be played by nanobots in their line of sight. And every nanobot's line of sight is the way they're facing. So strategically, if you wanted to, you can play a blink card to move one of your opponent's nanobots in front of you, then play a card such as Storm, which is going to blast nanobots in your facing and remove them back to that player's cache. Also, each nanobot in the game has an affinity. What that means is every time they play a card of their affinity, they're going to get a bonus, and every time a card of their affinity is played against them, that card is going to be played at a negative. For example, every single player gets access to all the other Nanobots' abilities, but if the Echidna plays a Grow card, he's going to get a +1 to the amount of charges on the card, and the amount of charges is the number listed on the card. So this card has 1 charge, 2 charges, 3 charges. So if the Echidna player plays the Grow card, they're going to get a +1 charge on the Grow card, which means they're going to be able to use it 4 times instead of 3, which allow them to add 4 Echidna Nanobots onto the board as soon as they play this card. Now if Inferno played this Grow card, since they're not Echidna, they don't have an affinity for the Echidna green abilities, they can only use it for up to the 3 charges to play up to 3 Nanobots on the board. The affinity also acts as a bonus and also acts like a negative. For example, if the Inferno player were to play this Burn card, since they have an affinity for burn, since that is their color, this card is going to have 2 charges, so they can use it to burn 2 of Echidna's units and destroy them and remove them completely from the game. But if the Echidna player decided to play this Burn card against the Inferno, which happens to have an affinity for the orange cards, it's going to have 1 less charge on it. So if I were to play Burn as Echidna versus Inferno, instead of getting 3 charges, I'm only going to get 2 charges, which allow me to destroy 2 of their Nanobots and remove them from the game. Basically, if you're playing a card of your affinity, it's going to give you 1 extra charge. If you're playing a card of an affinity against a player that matches their affinity, it's going to get 1 charge less. So if Echidna decided to play this Burn 1 card against Inferno, since it's going to lose 1 charge, it's going to have no effect against the Inferno player because it would effectively be a 0 charge card. Finally, there's also the graveyard that comes with the game. And the reason why the game has a graveyard is because most of the cards that you're going to play against your opponents aren't going to send these back to your player's draw pile. They're actually going to destroy these Nanobots and remove them from a game. So if Inferno plays a Burn 3 card against Echidna, he's going to manage to destroy 4 of your Nanobots, and they're removed from the game, and you don't get them back to try to re-add them to the game board anymore. They are gone, destroyed, and dead. Now that you understand the basic concepts for Nanobot Battle Arena, go ahead and show you exactly how the game plays. Before you start, you need to separate the deck into 1s, 2s, and 3s. This is going to make sure every player gets a nice even mix of cards when you start the game. Once you got the deck separated into the 1s, the 2s, and the 3 piles, each player is going to get a certain amount of cards to start the hand. You're going to get 3 of the 1 cards, you're going to get 2 of the 2 charge cards, and 1 of the 3 charge cards. So every player is going to start with exactly 6 cards. 3 of them will be single charges, 2 of them will be double charges, and the third one will be a single charge. It's random exactly what cards you get, but you're going to get 6 cards and the same amount of charges for every single player. Once each player has their starting hand, you need to figure out which Nanobots you're going to play. You can do that either by making decisions, rolling dice, or the easiest way, if you don't want anybody to particularly pick their one, just flip over the top card, and that's the Nanobot you're going to be playing. And once every player's got their Nanobots that way, you simply are going to shuffle up the deck of cards, and you're now ready to begin. There are 2 versions of the rules for Nanobot Battle Arena. There's the basic rules, and then there's basically the advanced rules, which are going to allow players to play with more Nanobots and have a lot more card play going on their turn. It does require multiple sets of the game to play the advanced rules, so I'm only going to show you the basic rules because I only have 1 copy of the game, and also gives you a rough idea of exactly how Nanobot Battle Arena plays. On a player's turn, they're simply going to take 1 of their Nanobots, place it on the board in any orientation facing they like. The only rules is that they have to be touching orthogonally another Nanobot unless there's no Nanobots on the board. They just simply place it on the center of the table. Once you have placed your Nanobot on the table, you're going to play a card, and you have to play a card. If you decide not to play a card, you're forced to discard a card to the discard pile. Whatever card that you play, you're going to resolve its effects. Then you're going to draw your hand back up to 6 cards. And your turn is over. It's going to be the next player's turn to go after that. That player is going to take 1 of their Nanobots, and they have to place it on the board, again orthogonally next to any Nanobots currently on the board. The rules is that you cannot place one of your Nanobots in front of another player's, and the other rule is you cannot place the Nanobot diagonally. They have to be placed orthogonally next to another Nanobot currently on the board. Then you simply play a card, resolve its effects, and your turn is going to be over. Draw your hand back up to 6 cards, and we move back up to the other player. Play is going to continue like this. Each player placing 1 Nanobot down on the table, playing a card, and the next player is going to do the same, play a Nanobot down the table, place a card, and you continue doing this until one player has placed their final Nanobot on the table. Once a player has placed their final nanobot on the table, the game ends instantly, and then you need to count up your chains and figure out who has the longest chain, and that's going to be the player who wins the game. There is one exception rule, though, to the game, and that's if two players happen to be fighting for the same space and they both happen to have their front facing the space, and they're both trying to vie for the same space. If this ever happens, this is the one time you can violate the rule that no player can ever place a nanobot in front of one of your players, because in this instance it's going to become first come, first serve for that space. So that means since it's the Inferno player's turn, they could place their nanobot right here, blocking off this other player, because they have legally placed a nanobot in front of them. Even though it places in front of the other player, again, this space was first come, first serve, even though two nanobots were facing in for it. Again, after you've placed all the nanobots and they're either out on the table or they happen to be in the graveyard because they've been destroyed by Inferno cards or they've been destroyed by corruption from the Blight cards, once that final nanobot has been placed on the table, the game is going to come to an end. You're going to count up the rows and figure out who has the longest chain, and that again is going to be the player who has won the game. Right now, currently in the game, there's 8 different powers available, and the way the rulebook has been written, I'm willing to bet that they have an expansion plan that's going to get extra cards and extra powers available in the game. Currently, the powers they have are Pivot, and what Pivot does is it allows you to play this card, and you can pivot an opponent's nanobot, breaking their chains, and making their life a little more difficult. Or there's a card such as Surge, which allows you to return nanobots to each player's draw pile as long as it's a nanobot in your line of sight. Next, you have cards such as Infect, which allows you to take your opponent's nanobots and corrupt them and turn them into your own nanobots, increasing your chains. Other thing you can do is you can Freeze, which is going to have whoever you cast Freeze on is going to lose access to that amount of cards from their hand randomly. You're going to pick that amount of cards, and they're not going to get access back to those cards until the end of their turn. Next thing you have is a Petrify card, which Petrify allows you to flip your nanobots over to their immune side, and as long as your nanobots are petrified, and it's kind of an odd term calling it petrified, they really should have called it shield, but basically when you're petrified, or as I like to refer to it as shielded, that means your nanobot is immune to any kind of card from any kind of nanobot until somebody plays a Petrify card on it to flip it back over to its darker side, which means it can be affected by other cards again. Then you have the Grow card, which is going to allow you to add extra nanobots on the table in any facing you like. And this is going to be on top of placing your cards from the normal gameplay. Next is the Blink ability, which is going to allow you to move your nanobots. As long as they keep the same facing, they can move to other spaces on the board, allowing you to increase your chain size. And then finally, we have the Burn ability, which allows you to target the end of a chain and destroy that nanobot and put it in the graveyard. Nanobot Battle Arena is a really quick playing strategy game with lots of direct player interaction. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial for Nanobot Battle Arena. Stay tuned for some sample gameplay in the next video of the series.